Today we're going to take a look at histology. So if you go to your lab packet and find on your lab CD the exercise entitled Histology, that will really help. And what we'll do today is put together some of the things you've thought about with your textbook and really try to capture how that applies to human tissues. So when we think of histology, if we were in a face-to-face class, we would be looking at these through the microscope. And if you're interested in doing that, you can make an appointment with me and I can show you some of these things through the microscope. But what we'll do instead, because this is an online class, is we'll go through the information together, and then I'm going to send you to a website where you can really see live tissues, and you can learn them in that way. So just as a preparation for this, when we think about histology, when we think of the human body, you probably think of sort of gross anatomy, the things that we can see very easily with the naked eye. But we really want to start back at that building block, those chemical building blocks. We started in chapter 2 with atoms. We put those together to form molecules, and those molecules then were used to build cells. And you just are working on cells right now in your text work. So the cell is a little machine in and of itself. It has a lot of activities, metabolism that it can conduct on its own, and then cells will work together to form tissues. And so today we're going to learn the 4 tissue types, and we're going to start with epithelial tissue. Now I don't expect you to be able to read everything off of this poster, but I'm going to try to point out a few things on the images. If you'll go instead to exercise 1, the epithelial tissue, we'll begin with that. So first of all, to give you some context, there are 4 tissue types in the human body: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. And we'll go through each of those today. The epithelial tissues, when you think of function, you want to think of covering, lining, and protecting. So the epithelial tissues will be over the surfaces of organs. They'll be lining tubes in the human body, whether it's a urinary tube like the urethra, or whether it's the digestive system. Inside the lungs, you find epithelial tissues. And what we want to do today is try to figure out some characteristics of epithelial tissues. So I gave you the basic functions: cover, line, and protect. Your exercise goes into even more detail: absorption, filtration, secretion. Secretion is typically putting things into either the tube, so if you think of the digestive system, maybe putting mucus into the tube to lubricate and allow things to move, or other needed materials. They also might function in excretion, and excretion is a little bit different. Excretion will be getting rid of waste materials. So sweating happens through your epithelial tissues, and you get rid of moisture. It's going to help cool the body when you sweat. And then sensory reception as well. Much later in 6 weeks or so, we're going to talk about the senses and how your eyes work and some of the amazing abilities of the epithelial cells of your eye. So 2 ways that we can look at the epithelial tissues to try to characterize them in terms of the morphology or the appearance. And that would be the arrangement, whether it's just a single layer of tissue, usually called simple, or whether it's got stratified appearance where it's layered. And so again, in your image that you've got in your lab manual and on the poster, and again the website that you'll have, you see what we call a simple layer, a single layer of cells that are lined up side by side. Stratified would be multiple layers lined up. The other thing that we can look at is the individual shape of the cell. So I'm not sure if you can see the individual shapes here, but think of cubes. In some of these images, you see that the cell is a cube. Well, it looks like a square, but 3-dimensionally, it's a cube. And this would be what we call simple cuboidal, because it's a single layer, so it's arranged in a single layer, and the shape is a cube. The one that I was pointing at initially was called simple columnar, because it's a single layer, and the cells individually are like little columns or rod-like in their shape. So those are some of the ways that we can identify epithelial tissues. There are essentially 3 basic shapes. I mentioned cuboidal and columnar already. Those are 2 fairly easy to recognize shapes. The last one is called squamous, and it's pronounced squamous, squamous, whatever you like. Tomato, tomato, that's what I always say. And that basically means flattened. So there's no particular shape, it's flattened, it's irregular. In this image, it's stratified squamous, so multiple layers of flattened cells. And that would be what you find on the outside of your body. The skin, the integumentary system has stratified squamous epithelium. So if you would take a few minutes and familiarize yourself with the variety of epithelial tissues that they have shown